This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am delighted to have you with me. We've got to talk about what's happened in China. It's a very big story. But before I get to that story, I need to bring you up to speed on a related story. The related story is Chinese hackers working for the Chinese government have tried to, in some cases successfully, have infiltrated American internet service providers trying to get confidential information. They've been snooping. And the Chinese are clearly maliciously aligned against us, which we've all known. But part of the thing I think that a lot of people in Washington aren't paying attention to is that they're already at war with us. They're in a soft war. It's not hard munitions, and it's not hot. It's a cold war, and they're coming for us one way or the other. The Chinese are dangerous, and they are not our rival. The Chinese are our enemy. But they have problems. I was talking to someone who is an expert who lives in a community filled with military, high-level military and intelligence personnel. And he said when they're sitting around and they're chatting together, having cigars and whiskey, 2027 comes up. They're all convinced 2027 is the year that China will finally invade Taiwan. And they're scrambling to get their military up to speed before 2027. This is from the Wall Street Journal. China's newest nuclear-powered attack submarine sank this spring, a major setback for one of the country's priority weapon systems. The episode, which Chinese authorities scrambled to cover up and hasn't previously been disclosed, occurred at a shipyard near Wuhan in late May or early June. It comes as China has been pushing to expand its navy, including its fleet of nuclear-powered submarines. The Pentagon has cast China as its principal long-term pacing challenge, and U.S. officials say Beijing has been using political and military pressure to try to coerce Taiwan, a separately governed island that Beijing claims as part of its territory. China says its goal in building a world-class military is to deter aggression and safeguard its interests. A spokesman for the Chinese embassy didn't respond to questions or comment. The U.S. doesn't know if the sub was carrying nuclear fuel at the time it sank, but experts outside the U.S. government said it was likely. Undersea technology has long been an area of U.S. advantage, but China's been pushing hard to narrow the gap. China's been moving to diversify the production of nuclear-powered submarines. Production has been centered in the northeastern city of Huludao, but China has moved the manufacture nuclear-powered attack submarines at the Wuchang shipyard near Wuhan. Beijing has 48 diesel-powered attack subs and 6 nuclear-powered attack subs at the end of 2022, according to a Pentagon report issued last year. That report said that China's aim in developing new attack submarines, surface ships, and naval aircraft is to counter efforts by the U.S. and its partners to come to Taiwan's aid during a conflict and to achieve maritime superiority within the first island chain, a string of territory from the Japanese archipelago through Taiwan and the Philippines to the South China Sea. The Zhao-class vessel that sank is the first of a new class of Chinese nuclear-powered subs and features a distinctive X-shaped stern, which is designed to make the vessel more maneuverable. The ship was built by China State Shipbuilding Corporation, a state-owned company, and was observed alongside a pier on the Yangtze River in late May when it was undergoing its final equipping before going to sea. After the sinking, large floating cranes arrived in early June to salvage the sub from the riverbed, according to satellite photos. The sinking of a new nuclear sub that was produced at a new yard will slow China's plans to grow its nuclear submarine fleet, said Britt Sadler, a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. This is significant. It's not surprising that the People's Liberation Army Navy would try to conceal the fact that their first-in-class nuclear-powered attack sub sank. Now, I have to tell you, this nuclear-powered submarine sinking comes on the heels of China's latest, greatest nuclear aircraft carrier problems. China decided to build a great big nuclear aircraft carrier. Within weeks at sea, it began to crack in half. It was pulled back in and had to be repaired. And when it got back out to sea this year, it caught on fire and was allegedly not salvageable. This is the fundamental problem for communist regimes. Whistleblowers get killed. In this country, they get cash prizes for blowing the whistle and lawsuits if they get fired. In China, whistleblowers are hanged or shot or just disappeared, buried under concrete. Communist regimes have fundamental flaws in their operation by virtue, by nature of being a communist regime. A top economist in China has disappeared. He was in a group chat with who he thought were friends. And in this group chat with people he thought were friends, he openly criticized the economic handling of Xi Jinping, the president of China, and said in this group chat that Xi Jinping is not an economist and clearly doesn't know what he's doing with the economy, and he's made things worse. One of his friends in the group chat ratted him out. No one knows where he is or if he's even alive. We know this happened because someone else in the group chat then leaked the group chat to Western media. Communist regimes are diabolical. What was the name of it? I can't remember the name of it. There's a great movie about the Stasi in East Germany. I cannot remember it now. I'm sure someone will remember it for me. I can't remember. Hey, now this is going to bother me. Movie about East German spy. It was The Lives of Others. That's it. The Lives of Others, based on East Germany, 1984. The Lives of Others. And one of the wild aspects of these communist regimes is how everyone, particularly kids, are just trained to rat out your parents and rat out your family. Everybody gets spied on. There's a paranoia that creeps into communist regimes. There's a dark paranoia. Whistleblowers are disappeared. People who go against the herd disappear. It's something we're finding now. This is, let's go back to the Eric Adams story, the absurdity of it being about immigration. The herd has decided it's got to be about immigration. The tribal urge of the right is immigration's the hot topic. It's got to be about immigration. Pay attention to nothing else. That's what it's about. And the people who stand up to the herd and say, no, you guys are idiots, they get punished. They're the controlled opposition. They get smeared. Because it's the groupthink. And in a communist country, there's only one group that you can be a part of. There are heterodox Democrats who get punished by Democrats for thinking outside the Democratic box. There are heterodox Republicans who get punished for thinking outside the thinking of MAGA and the Republicans right now. They tend more often than not to be the ones who are right. It's the groupthink that leads everybody astray, and that's the problem for a communist country, is there is only one group of thinking, and anyone who strays from that group is punished and silenced, and everyone knows it, so no one's allowed to say anything. It's why that survey I talked about yesterday is so important. The surveys of what people believe privately versus what they believe publicly in this country. You couldn't even have a survey like that in China, in large part because people would be suspicious that the surveyor would rat them out to the Chinese Communist Party. In this country, it's growing difficult to do because of the lack of trust in institutions and the lack of trust in the media, the lack of trust across the board, but it's still possible in this country. And what you find is that by and large, people in this country still privately have some conservative ideals and what they stand for, but publicly they keep their mouths shut because they're afraid they're going to be ratted out and punished. Now do that at scale, and that's China. The Chinese are deeply problematic when it comes to this sort of stuff. The Chinese can't reform because to reform would require multiple parties, multiple thinking, and multiple tribes and multiple ideas, and would have a competition among ideas. And communists hate competition. So it's the party line all the way down. So I'm sure there were people who were building the aircraft carrier that cracked in half and then caught on fire that said, we're doing it wrong. But they couldn't raise their voices lest they be punished or killed. I'm sure there were people who thought the same thing about the submarine, but they too couldn't say anything. They'd be punished or killed. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the reality. So the Chinese solution then is to overwhelm all of us with numbers and to hope that they can overwhelm us with numbers before the rot within takes shape. They can deal with the rot once they've dealt with us. Their gamble has to be that they can deal with us before the rot takes them out. But because they're communists, there's hope on our side. We do have problems. A majority of our fleet can't get to sea due to maintenance problems. We are short-staffed. We have problems in this country. We have problems with our maintenance operations. We have problems with our recruitment operations. We have problems with our building operations. But the problems we have with our building operations are short-staffed problems, and we do have manufacturing problems that are rooted out by the whistleblowers. The Chinese have a short staff problem because their population's in decline, and they've got a problem because they have no whistleblowers. They have no quality control agents to tell them they need to slow down and do better, which still continues to put us in a superior position. The problem, though, with China is that it is not a nation on the rise. China is a nation on decline, and a nation on decline is far more dangerous because its leaders know it's in decline, and they're trying to find ways to stop it. And for a communist nation, those ways almost always involve their military. My buddy Josh from Georgia Spa Companies texted me during commercial break, says, don't forget to make sure your hot tub cover is buckled in so it doesn't blow in tonight. And I wanted to text him back and say, actually, I thought I would just watch the hurricane from sitting in the hot tub, watch it blow over me. I could. It's going to be a lot of rain and it's going to be a lot of wind. As it is tracking right now, it continues to wobble a little bit. And a buddy of mine who's listening right now, paying attention to this, is a meteorologist, and he sent me the latest map, and it looks like the eye could come right over my house while it's still a hurricane, which would actually to some degree be good because that's where it's less intense and where the worst of the storm is going to be to the east of me here in Georgia. So if you're in Gray or Milledgeville, Georgia, or up towards Lake Oconee and in Eatonton, you're going to really get pounded by the storm. And thus far, if it continues to track a little bit east of me, it's going to be bad where I am. But hopefully, the worst of it will be to the east of me. Prayers appreciated that this thing continues to track to the east of where I am. We will see. It has been raining here since about 10:30 this morning or so. Off and on, it's kind of drizzly right now. as this hurricane continues to roll in. So if you're listening to this on a Friday and I'm doing this live on Thursday, it actually means that my power went out and I couldn't do my show on Friday. So we'll see. If nothing else, I'm hoping I can get you some specially recorded programming, because I know my flagship station, WSB, is probably going to want me local. So I got to figure out how to do a local show and a national show, which means I probably got to do some fresh work for you guys in the morning before I take over local air on WSB to give live local coverage for the hurricane. We'll make it all work, though. In the meantime, I got some folks who want to talk about tariffs, and I am happy to continue talking about tariffs, but I have a minute here. So it would be a great disservice to them who have waited for some time to be on the program to give them like 30 seconds. So you guys who are on hold, stick around. I'm happy to take your phone calls, and the rest of you, 877-973-7425. And as always, if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the live stream, the podcast, the show notes. You can follow me around on social media, including Instagram and Twitter. The links are all there. You're probably going to want to follow me on Instagram so I can, I'll be able to give you pictures tomorrow, I'm sure, after Helene has blown through middle Georgia where I am. When we come back, we got to talk about the Jack Smith filing in addition to your phone calls, because Judge Chatkin, as I predicted, said he could release his filing of accusations against Donald Trump. I'm torn as to whether or not this is going to help Trump or hurt Trump. But I do think the bottom line here is that they're allowing this guy to do this in the run-up to an election, which I personally think violates the norms of the Justice Department when it comes to election interference, but they don't care. It's very clear she hates Trump and he hates Trump, and there was no way Trump was going to win that argument. Now, we'll get into that and your phone calls when we come back. But first, I need to tell you about Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank is a bank that was started by conservatives who could see the banking trends developing in this country, where progressives were buying shares in banks and then using their ownership clout to direct banks to not work with certain entities and certain sorts of people, including conservatives. There have been more than one conservative in this country who's had their bank shut down because they've been labeled problematic. So that's where Old Glory Bank came in. Old Glory Bank bought a bank in Oklahoma that's been around for over 100 years. Stable financial institution. They rebranded it as Old Glory Bank, and they have made it available nationally for people instead of just as a regional or local bank. And it's now my bank. I have my checking and my savings account with them, and you can too. All you do is go to oldglorybank.com. Oldglorybank.com. You can sign up with them. You can get an online checking. You can get a mobile checking, mobile savings, no fees. And they do loans. They do mortgages. They are a real bank. Oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I got some folks who've been waiting on hold, want to talk about tariffs, and I want to begin with Colin. Colin, welcome to the Eric Erickson Show.
Hey, how you doing? Long-time listener, big fan.
Thank you.
I understand your point about tariffs and how it ends up being, quote, a tax on the U.S. people and everything. However, it really, in my mind, it's really a national security issue, because there is virtually no heavy manufacturing left in this country. And while I understand Trump wants to get it back and he's using the jobs for Americans, argument to do it, the real issue is that state and local regulations, minimum wage laws, OSHA regulations, and things like that have made it too expensive for American industry to compete with the Chinese and Mexicans and things like that, where they don't have those kind of regulations, and they can, they'll pay people $3 a day or whatever. Not that I'm saying we should go back to that, but people need to understand that, if you want all these protections and securities for being in the United States, then things are just going to cost more. And so companies have gotten around the fact that, their products and services are going to cost more. They just do it overseas, and it keeps the cost low. But what it does is it means we don't have any of that capability here anymore. you can't hardly get a lithium-ion battery. It's almost impossible to get a lithium-ion battery in this country that's made in the United States. They're all made in China because of all the safety regulations and EPA regulations and things like that associated with them. Even more than that, like ships, there are very, very few shipyards left. So our ships are actually being made overseas. Our Navy ships, cargo ships, container ships, they're being made overseas. And he's trying to bring that back. But the only way you can do it is either A, make the countries that don't have all those extra costs, make them, pay tariffs to bring them in, or get rid of all the regulations so that it doesn't cost so much to have them made here. And that'd be a disaster. Nobody would let that happen. So it's really a tough call.
For national security reasons, it does make sense in some cases to repatriate. For example, a buddy of mine was texting me during break. Tungsten is something that we need in our weapon systems, and we get almost all of it from China. And it's not that we don't have it here. It's that we have so many environmental regulations. It's almost impossible to mine it in this country because you get the environmentalists mad, and there's got to be a balance. But I think there's a difference on the national security front from a weapon system or hardware components for computers and things like that, or even antibiotics, as opposed to a clothing or a stuffed animal or a toy. There absolutely needs to be repatriated into this country our industrial capacity for national security. It's going to drive up costs. And one of our alternatives to that is what I call ally shoring, which we don't have to manufacture everything in this country because it is going to drive up costs. It's going to drive up a lot of costs. And in some cases, it's going to drive up costs so much that it's going to kill an industry because people are going to stop buying the product. They're going to find a way without it. But what you can do is, instead of manufacturing in China, manufacture in India or manufacture in Argentina. Help President Milei prop up his support by creating jobs in Argentina. Where you could produce things at less price than you could here. The problem with the entire idea of tariffs is if you apply it broadly, it discredits everyone's desire to do it. I think a lot of Americans, myself included, would say if it's for national security purposes, yes, this makes sense. But also, maybe we can find somewhere to manufacture stuff more cheaply. Here's the problem. The bottom line is this. You decide we're going to put tariffs on everything, you're going to raise up costs. And for those of you who say that'll just repatriate manufacturing, that's never happened in the past. With steel tariffs and other tariffs, we haven't actually seen regrowth of an American industry. What we've seen is a collapse of industry as people change their shopping habits, because for most Americans, it's far cheaper to go find a different product than it is to pay a higher price. And the reality is, we in this country are used to cheap products. No one in this country is going to buy a $3,000 iPhone. Well, okay, I would, but the rest of you're not going to buy a $3,000 iPhone. You're just not going to do it. You're going to find something inferior, and every phone other than the iPhone is inferior to the iPhone, let's be honest, Charlie. But nonetheless, you can only drive up costs so much before people abandon products, and we've got to find that balance, and broad enough tariffs is probably not great economic policy. Mark, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm living the dream. I hope you are.
I am.
Good. My comment was very similar to the previous caller, and that was that, your comparison of Harris's plan on corporate tax structure and Trump's tariff plan, although the results might end up being the same, I guess I was more in favor of the tariffs along the lines of what the previous caller mentioned, because the purpose of tariffs is to try and help American goods, products, and so forth be more competitive with those that are produced overseas. I agree with you. Hey, if you can find a more friendlier country and assist them, I get the desire behind that. But even in that vein right there, we still end up losing jobs. I was involved in the 807 textile trade, where we lost all sorts of textile manufacturing jobs under the guise of putting manufacturing in Central American countries, hoping that they would be able to make more money to buy more American goods, and nothing like that happened at all. But given the choice between a corporate tax increase, which is designed to, supposedly bring in more revenue to the government, the end result is that, she's trying to play, the good guy against the evil corporate evildoers. And I would just, if I had to pick between the two, I would take the tariff over the corporate tax thing, hopefully helping out someone here in America producing a similar good or product.
Well, my only concern with that, and my great caution on that one, is that by and large, what we know about tariffs is when they're imposed, we don't actually suddenly spark competition. We're not actually generating competition with tariffs. What we've done is we've made the price higher. And so it does make, if there's a competing American good that exists, it might make it more competitive. But the way that the tariff policy is designed right now, and hopefully it'll change, is blanket tariffs. Not on just things that are made here versus things that are made abroad. The way it's actually worded, and by the way, I did pull it up, and it is this, that it is a blanket tariff on everything. You raise the price of a good. Maybe you find a good here locally that is comparable, that is cheaper, but it's still more expensive. And so it becomes inflationary. And that's the thing I think everybody misses. The logic is, well, if I raise the price of the foreign good so much that the domestic good becomes cheaper just by virtue of it not having tariff, that domestic good by default is still more expensive. So what you may wind up doing is discouraging people from buying into that category at all. But more importantly, what you're doing is you've guaranteed a price increase. And because you've guaranteed a price increase, you're either going to buy the thing that was abroad $15 is now $20, and the domestic thing is $17.50. You've at least guaranteed a $2.50 price increase on the American public. At a time, keep in mind, that wages have not bounced back from inflation. So you're, by default, driving up the cost of goods in this country without commensurate wage increases in this country. So you have created inflationary pressure that harms people's wages. And that's why in the 1950s and 60s, we had this entire consensus among economists on the left and the right that tariffs are a bad idea because they are inflationary. You get rid of the tariffs, prices come down. And that's one of the things people miss as well. With inflation right now, we don't want deflation. Deflation economically is very bad. It's what China's going through. Deflation is where all the costs of everything fall. You don't want that. What you want is you want no inflation or minimal inflation, and you want your wages to inflate as well. If you have deflation of the costs of goods and services in this country, then suddenly you're going to have mass unemployment because you're being paid X for something that is now worth negative Y. They're paying you. They can't make any money because the cost of goods and services has fallen. What you want is for your wages to keep rising while the cost of goods and services in this country are barely rising. So your wages now exceed the cost of goods and services, or at least balance them out. You put a tariff on things, you're immediately skyrocketing the cost of things, and your wages aren't going to be able to come up to compete because where's the money go? The money for the higher good isn't going to the manufacturer's pocket, it's going to the government. The other problem here is that Donald Trump is selling the tariffs he's selling tariffs as some way to pay down the debt. The problem is we know how much we import in this country. We import like $3 trillion worth of stuff. You add a 10% tariff, that's going to bring in $300 billion. I can do that math in my head. That $300 billion does not put a dent in the national debt at all, but it has caused a 10% increase in prices across the board for Americans, and that's not good. And look, I realize there are people who can defend tariffs, and if you're going to impose a tariff, for example, on our enemy, like I'm not strictly opposed to applying a tariff to things made in China and force manufacturers to move out of China. I'm not really opposed to that. And I'm not opposed to us forcing manufacturing for national security come back to this country. It's not an all or nothing matter. The problem is, if it is treated as a blanket tariff across the board, it is inflationary and your costs do go up. And you may say, rah, rah, this is good for us. But the low information voter who's going to decide the election, what do you think he's going to do? Do you think the low information voter who's going to decide the election is going to be, Well, I stand by Donald Trump. Do you really believe the low information voter who's going to decide the election is going to do that when their goods and costs of their goods go up? I don't think so. I don't think so. There are ways you can apply tariffs. Like, for example, Trump's tariffs on China did force China to reckon with their trade policies. And we did get some benefit from that. But that was a strategically placed tariff. An across-the-board tariff isn't strategic. All it's going to do is provoke a trade war. Now, I got to move on from this because I'm almost out of time, and I still got to talk about the Jack Smith situation. Now, we can argue about tariffs some other time. I got to tell you about the Jack Smith situation. He's going to file this brief. This brief is going to be a restatement of the January 6th arguments. And it's going to attempt to not to be a legal brief to persuade the judge. It's going to be a political brief to try to persuade those low information voters that Trump is bad. Here's my sense of things. My sense of things is that, like all of the other prosecutions of Donald Trump, it's going to come across as persecution, not prosecution. And for all the Republicans who are freaked out about it, I'm kind of thinking this may wind up helping Trump, just like the Alvin Bragg situation helped Donald Trump. That prosecution in New York helped Donald Trump. And I do think there may be some political gain had by Donald Trump to yet again show a Democratic prosecutor and a Barack Obama appointed judge who hates him are yet again trying to use the legal warfare of this country to steal an election. If he plays it right, Jack Smith may just fall into Donald Trump's hands on this. Like throwing Brer Rabbit into the briar patch. But at the same time, I do have to say, I am very perturbed by a Barack Obama appointed judge and a federal prosecutor who hates Donald Trump using lawfare to try to stop Donald Trump with only about 41 days left in this election. There is no reason for them to advance this brief before the election except to try to shape the election. And that's a problem, and it's one that all of us should acknowledge, but Democrats are incapable of acknowledging because Democrats only care about the right thing to do if they think that right thing to do is stopping Donald Trump. And then when it blows up in their faces, that's when they complain. Hillsdale College has pointed out a lot of the precedents in this country and how they're problematic and why they're bad, and also the history of this country. You can get all this stuff. Their podcast network's amazing. Your favorite podcast app, you just look for the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, or you get Dr. Larry Arndt's lecture series available free of charge. You just go to ericforhillsdale.com today, ericforhillsdale.com. You can get Imprimis completely free. It's show prep for your mind. You can get the podcast network, podcast conversations. You can get their courses that are free, the lecture series on the Constitution, on citizenship, and so much more. I learned stuff from the Constitution series that I thought I already knew from law school, and yet I didn't. So here we are. It is a great opportunity for you to begin to learn about Hillsdale College and take advantage of so much of their free material. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. Go there, you find out about Hillsdale College, you get Imprimis, you get their podcasts, you get their lecture series on the Constitution, on citizenship, you get so much for free, and you learn more about this great institution that has been educating Americans since the 1800s. Not indoctrination, but actual education. Well, yeah, everything keeps updating, and it just pretty much look like I'm going to get smacked by a hurricane. So, again, as I've said throughout the day, this is Thursday, September 26th. It's now 2:55 p.m. on my clock. If you're hearing this on Friday around 2:55 p.m., that means my power's out and I can't do the show. We've made arrangements for me to be able to do it. I've got some battery backups and stuff, but you just never know how this is going to play out. There may be trees down, not able to get out of the neighborhood. I've got my chainsaw ready to go for tomorrow if need be. This is going to be a very big storm for those of us in the Southeast, and the rain that's already coming in, unfortunately, is softening up the ground for the hurricane. So it makes it more likely with the soft ground now that you may get more trees down. It's all just a very fluid situation. All of you in the Southeast, remember, as you may not be able to get TV or stuff, radio is free and over the air. So if you have a radio, you will be able to get programming. I do want to tell you very importantly that is south of me now, in Georgia, across the state line now from Florida headed into Georgia, there's a line of tornadoes blowing north. Hazelhurst, from Hazelhurst all the way over to Sycamore, Georgia. It's just this is a fast-moving, dangerous storm that's shaping up. So prayers are appreciated that we survive this unscathed. I am going to be right in the bend based on current projections. So if the storm goes literally like 10 miles to my west, it's going to be brutal for where I am. And if it goes where it's supposed to be, it's going to be bad. If it goes 10 miles to the east of me, it's actually not going to be terrible. So it all depends on the wobble and the eye of the storm. Your prayers are very much appreciated as we come through. Hurricane Helene, we've had hurricanes come through before plenty of times where we are. We've just haven't had one this strong come in this path. But I've been through Andrew. I've been through Katrina, been through plenty of storms in the past. Have to do what my dad did. So my daughter was born the night Katrina rolled through, and they were in Louisiana. They were well inland, slightly north of Baton Rouge. They were without power for quite a while. I called my dad to tell him our daughter had been born and asked him what he was doing, and he said the only thing reasonable people can do at a time like this, eating all the ice cream before it melts. We may be eating ice cream before it melts tonight. Also, prayers for Georgia Power. Please, Georgia Power, please keep my lights on so that I can do my radio show tomorrow. Okay, I'm out of time. Tomorrow, if I'm around tomorrow, my plan is to start the show with an op-ed from Mike Pence, who is actually making some pretty good points about the future of Republicans and conservatives in the country and why it is so necessary to force Kamala Harris to own the Biden agenda. I want to talk to you about that tomorrow. You guys have a great night. Stay safe out there in the Southeast. It's going to be messy.